Blanket stitch applique on the BERNINA 570. It's one of the most satisfying ways to do applique. And all the applique stitches hang out in the quilt menu, which you'll start by touching over here on the side, and then go ahead and scroll up. Starting with stitch number 1309, you will find that's the most universal blanket stitch that most people reach for, but you see some other ones. A heavier version, so the stitches are going to go back and forth more times, and even some that are set to stitch out slightly different, not just mirror imaged, and that's why we talk about stitching out all these stitches in a stitch book so you can be familiar with why all these stitches are on your screen. They're going to look different. So I'm going to show you with our open toe foot a couple tips that I like to do. And so first off, one of the things we notice is that this stitch is going to stitch in the middle of our foot. Now, that's okay, but if you want to actually use one of the edges of the foot as a guide, start by moving your needle position all the way to the far right side. Now I'm going to do that so when I'm ready to stitch, it's going to be easily guided. Now on my machine, what I'll do is I'll save that setting of the needle move to the far right by touching the eye and then going over here and touching the save option. So now every time that I turn the machine on and come to this stitch, this is my default setting. So if you did not know that you can override all the default settings in this machine to the way you sew, definitely check out that video. And note that you can do that for not just needle position, but stitch width and stitch length. And then when you hit save, that's now the default setting. Now, as easy as it is to set it, to touch the, hey, go back to normal setting, the factory setting, all you have to do is touch the unsave button off to the side. So I had the needle position moved all the way to the right, and I'll just leave it at the normal width and length, and I'll get started by showing you how to guide it around an applique piece of fabric. You can see the needle starting way over here on this side, which means that if I'm putting my edge of my fabric up against the inside of the toe, I have something to follow as I stitch. Now, back to how wide a stitch is to be, it all depends on how big your applique piece is. If it's a real big body of a snowman, well gosh, this little tiny stitch is going to not even show. Then, at that point, you're going to make it a little bit more pronounced, a little wider, a little longer. I usually do about the same width as I do for length, and then I can get it exactly where I want. You also notice that the machine currently is, when the needle stops in the down position, it's hovering. So that's going to make it really easy as you go around curves and not just straight edges, and being able to kind of stop and pivot at shorter distances. Plus, you don't have to lift your presser foot to do it. The machine kind of does it for you. So that's a setting that you can set for your needle down option. And for the days you don't want it to always be popping up every time you stop sewing, you can always turn it off for when you don't want it to do that. But for applique, on my machine, it's always on. Now we do a lot of decorative stitches. In our BERNINA Stitching Cosmos online course, we talk about that a lot. We talk about stitching out all these stitches and doing your stitch book, so this is a major reason. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pick that next stitch over, and I am going to put the needle position back to the far side. This will be a heavier version of this stitch. You'll see it now go back and forth, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And this is going to give you the look that you did it with thicker thread, but without actually changing your thread. You can actually just use the one you have, and it's all set to go. So let's just take a look and compare the differences. You can see the heavier version. It's also saved a little bit wider compared to its original setting for the first blanket stitch. Now make sure you stitch out all your blanket stitches. They do have different looks and different uses. Use the question mark to get the definition of what each of these stitches are and why they're saved in your machine. But I hope you'll try out not just blanket stitch applique, but applique with decorative stitches like we do in our Stitching Cosmos online course, where you can learn so much more about stitches and accessory feet. And I can come to your sewing room and we can have fun together. Check out the links and the free videos you can check out to see if this course is right for you. You'll find everything you need to check out in the links below.